Mr. Netanyahu, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. I know that you guys had some crazy circumstances going on over there in Israel with bombs coming in. And so I thank you for coming on and doing this anyway and having this interview with me. I just got a couple questions I want to ask. Obviously, I've been to Israel. I love Israel. I'm obviously pro-Israel. So I think a lot of people that follow me know that. But I have a couple questions I just want to ask you because there are people in our country who I would argue are naysayers, people who disagree with some of the things that I've said and some of the things that you've said. And so one of the things that I find to be dear to the hearts of people in America is the relationship between Israel, the Christians who live there. And there are people who believe, to a small degree, in my opinion, that Christians' relationships or the relationships of Christians in Israel aren't as good. And so can you speak to that, Prime Minister, about how Christians live in Israel? Are they accepted in Israel? Are they treated fairly in Israel? And then we'll get to some of the Christians that are in Gaza.
Well, first of all, this is the birthplace of Christianity. In all these sites, people could walk and do walk in the footsteps of Jesus. Christians are not merely tolerated in Israel. They're welcomed as a treasure of our common Judeo-Christian heritage. And Israel is the only place in the Middle East where Christians are safe, because throughout the Middle East, churches are bombed, Christians are killed, as happened in Syria, murdered mercilessly, and elsewhere. And in Israel, we are brothers. And, we have, I think, 300 Christmas trees that have been brought to Jerusalem to enable Christians to celebrate Christmas. I visit Christian communities all the time. We welcome them. Many of them, by the way, serve in our military, brave defenders. And I'll give you an example of what happens when we're not here. Under the Oslo Accords, we gave Bethlehem. I don't have to explain what Bethlehem is, do I, Brandon? I mean, it's a holy place for the Christians. Well, when we were there for decades, the Christian community was 80% of the population, and the Muslim community was 20%, actually less than 20%. We left it, we gave it to the Palestinian Authority, the Muslim Palestinian Authority. Now, a few decades later, the numbers are exactly reversed. There are 80% Muslims in Bethlehem and less than 20% Christians. They've basically been booted out. So it's good to be a Christian in Israel. It's bad to be a Christian outside of Israel in the Middle East. Not everywhere. Some places they're more tolerated more than elsewhere, in some of the Gulf states, for example. But this is what characterizes us. We cherish the holy places, the freedom to worship, the fact that people have different faiths, different beliefs. We not only tolerate it, we treasure it and we protect it.
Prime Minister, there's a sentiment of, I guess, mistreatment of Christians in Gaza from Israel. People point to the Catholic Church that was bombed in Gaza. They also point to the Christians who live in Gaza now that are refusing to leave, even after giving an order to leave the area, because obviously there's going to be military operations there. What do you say to the naysayers who are saying that Christians may be safe in Israel proper, but they're not safe in Gaza, and that there's no regard for Christianity and holy sites in Gaza?
Well, first of all, there are very few number of Christians in Gaza because Hamas is a tyranny. It's a terrorist tyranny that wants to not only murder all the Jews, but it doesn't accept Christianity. It doesn't accept other faiths. It doesn't even accept other persuasions of Islam that they deem are heretics. So it's not good to be a Christian in Gaza, and that's why there are not many of them. I think that our concern for the welfare of Christians in Gaza is our concern for the welfare of civilians. We've sent millions of text messages to Gazans to leave battle zones. We've sent text messages, phone calls, and Hamas has been shooting people who want to leave war zones. They actually shoot women and children because they use the civilian population as human shields. Now, as far as the church you're talking about, that was an unfortunate accident. There are things that happen in war, and they're not intentional. They happen, and a church was bombed. So I called up the Pope, and I said, "Listen, I'm very sorry that this happened. It wasn't intentional, And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that the Christian leaders and the staff can come back to this church. We actually made a safe passage for them, and they can rebuild, with our help, rebuild that church, because that's our policy. Accidents do happen in war, but that in no way reflects on our policy. And in fact, the way we treated this mishap does reflect on our policy, because we actually took care of them, and we do everything in our power to protect them. In a war zone, it's much more difficult, obviously, but we still go to lengths to do that. And in Israel, if you actually talk to the majority of Christians, talk to them, you'll see what they say. They say Israel is the only place where we're respected and protected.
And I can attest to that as a Christian who went to Israel. I spent 2 weeks there with the church, and we had an incredible time. We had only one incident where a small child spit on one of the pastors, and immediately after, there was an adult that came by and said, "That's not a representation of who we are. You know, we love you guys. You guys are always welcome here." And I have to say, no adults gave us any grief. We had no issues whatsoever. And our experience there, it was actually an amazing experience. It actually changed the way I thought about Israel, and I fell in love with Israel when I came there. And I think a lot of that is a testament to how Christians are actually treated, not what the naysayers say.
Brian, I want to add to that. Look, one of my lifelong friends is Willem van der Ven, and he is he was for many years. He established the Christian embassy in Jerusalem. He brought in Christian communities into Israel from around the world. And I went to a lot of their celebrations. They celebrate a lot of holidays, including Christmas, obviously, but many others. They also celebrate our holidays, like the Feast of Tabernacles and so on. And I made it a point to go there every year. So the whole image, the false image, this horrible vilification against the one democracy in the Middle East, Israel, that embraces Christianity, that embraces our common heritage. I mean, this is a vile, vile lie that shouldn't be allowed to spread. And I think we can debunk it easily. Come to Israel, you'll see how you'll be greeted with open arms, as you were.
And I wrote down a couple of questions because I didn't want to miss anything. The accusations of war crimes. So we see it all over mainstream media here in the United States of America, all over the world. They're making these claims that Israel is committing war crimes, you are a war criminal, and that you guys are indiscriminately, not only, like we mentioned before, destroying Christian monuments in Gaza, but killing people indiscriminately, especially children. And these are some of the accusations that have come out. Can you respond directly to those charges? You know, many, and you've probably heard this too, many people say that you are facing criminal charges and this is the reason why you're perpetuating the war. Can you speak to those issues that people are bringing up, justifiably or not? Can you speak to that, Prime Minister?
Yes, I can. First of all, about our policy in conducting a just war. We do that with just means. No army in history has gone to the lengths that Israel has gone to protect the civilian population in enemy territory. Do you know of any other army in the world who's put in 2 million tons of food for the population of an enemy territory? You won't find that. Or that, for that matter, that warns people before we take action, losing the element of surprise. We're going to come into this neighborhood, please leave. And as I said, Hamas shoots them in order to prevent them from leaving because Hamas wants them killed. And then they can shift the blame to us. And of course, the media buy the Hamas lies and statistics, hook, line, and sinker. And that's how you get the civilian casualties. But if you look at other theaters, and Colonel John Spencer of West Point, who's the head of urban studies in West Point, he studied all urban conflicts in modern times. He says that Israel has gone to unprecedented lengths to prevent civilian casualties. And the ratio is probably about 1.5 to 1, 1.5 non-combatants to 1, which is probably very low, very, very low compared to what it was in various theaters in the Iraq War, in other places as well, in Afghanistan, where it climbed up to as many as 7 to 1. It's a very dense urban environment. You know, Hamas took all the money that was given to them, billions, and poured it not into building Gaza, but into building a terror underground city under Gaza. They don't let the civilian population go into the tunnels. They go into the tunnels to protect themselves, and they force the civilian population above ground to stay in the battle zones. That's why you have the casualties, and they should be the accusation should be put squarely on Hamas's corner. Now, as far as accusing me of war crimes, that's incredible. Yeah, it was surface level. Of course, they'd accuse us of anything. They'd accuse me of anything. But the ICC, the International Criminal Court, was asked to check it. So the ICC prosecutor said, "Well, I'm going to come to Israel, and I'm going to look. I'm going to look at things directly by myself." And he plans a visit. He even says that Israel has an exemplary independent judiciary, which means that we can investigate and do investigate any charges of war crimes by our own people, as very few democracies do to that extent. And he's supposed to come here. I'll tell you what happens, Brandon. The day that he's supposed to come here, he cancels the visit. And a day or two later, he issues these warrants of war crimes against me and our former defense minister. And, we didn't understand why. You said you'd come and check it, and you spoke about our judicial system. What happened? Well, it took us a while. It took us several months to know what really transpired. What happened is that a few days before the planned visit, he was accused by a female staff member in his office of raping and molesting her. And he said, "Well, I'm ruined." And by the way, he had good reason to think that, because his own brother, who's a member of parliament in Britain, was put in jail for sexual assault. And so he thought that's where he's going. And he figured out, there's one way to get out of this. It's to, hit the Jews, hit Israel, hit me. You'll get there, you'll get all the ultra progressives to line up with him, all the anti-Semites of the world to line up with him and somehow exonerate him. So he wasn't there to defend justice. He was there to escape justice. That's what he was doing. And for a while it held. Then some other woman surfaced just now and accused him of the same crime. So what he was doing to escape his own culpability, he blamed Israel of the worst crimes, which is laughable. I mean, look, all these leaders of Iran, leaders of various jihadist communities, all charged with war crimes. I mean, you can charge them from here to, you can circle the earth with the number of charges that they have. They're welcomed around the world. They're feted. That's ridiculous. Israel, the one democracy that does all these things to avoid hurting civilians, is accused by this corrupt prosecutor who was trying to escape justice. So I think that it's one of those corruptions of truth that have to be exposed, and I'm glad I have the opportunity to put it forward. This has just happened. He was accused by several women of sexual assault and rape, and he tries to get away with it by shifting a bogus claim against Israel and against me. Eventually truth wins, and it will win out here too.
Prime Minister, you've seen, obviously you've been involved in it. You run the country in Israel, and there's been journalists that have been killed. People are making claims that journalists aren't allowed into Gaza to report. Obviously, if anybody's paying attention to the news, there have been accusations that some of these journalists have been a part of Hamas. The more recent incident at the hospital where there's a room of journalists that was targeted, can you explain that scenario? Because I heard that there was more to the situation than just the bombing of an isolated location at the hospital. There was actually terrorists there. Are terrorists operating out of these hospitals, or was this a accident, a misfire? Can you explain what happened at the hospital just the other day?
Yeah, first a general understanding, and then the specific case. Hamas uses hospitals, mosques, schools as command posts. Okay, they use it because they don't care about the civilian population. We ask people to leave, but we have to take, we have to also win the war. So we ask people to leave, and then we have to take on these things. And what do you think we find there? We find in hospitals, we find weapons, we find military communications, we find underground tunnels. In fact, in the largest hospital, Shifa Hospital, we found a nexus of all these terror tunnels right under the hospital. So we found hospitals to be basically the opposite of hospitals. They were terrorist command posts, which we take out after asking the population to leave. In this particular case, we had a camera, a surveillance camera in a hospital that was giving the location of our troops to the Hamas. So it was basically used, that camera on the hospital was used to target our own soldiers. And the order was given, take out the camera. And unfortunately, the way that they took out the camera was to use, they used too heavy ammunition. So that's what caused the killing of the journalists. Some of them were real journalists, and that's a tragedy. And some of them were not. And that's, many of them are not, by the way. Many of the people who are called journalists in Gaza are basically Hamas activists or Hamas sympathizers, but they're not real journalists. But anytime you have a journalist killed, it's a tragedy, and it's not an intended tragedy. It's not something that we do intentionally. I think that's another one of these lies. I don't know why Hamas is talking about journalism as though there's a free press in Gaza. I mean, you can't open your mouth. You speak against the regime, and they shoot you. I mean, they execute you. They put a bullet in the back of your head. So to speak of press freedom vis-a-vis Hamas is ridiculous. Hamas uses civilians as human shields, and they use journalists also as human shields. So obviously that's not our policy. As far as letting people come into Gaza, we do it on a careful basis because it's a war zone and people can get killed. That's precisely what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid the situation because the example of the hospital tells you the risk that we're trying to reduce. We don't want real journalists to be killed. We don't want civilians to be killed. And so we're trying to clear the battle zones before we let a flurry of journalists in. But we let journalists come in on a selective basis. And by the way, some of them are not sympathizers, and they can see the truth for themselves, and they do.
And I want to get to two more things, Prime Minister, and thank you for your time, because I know that obviously that you guys are going through something right now, even in Israel. I want to touch on two things. The latter part of what I want to touch on is, what is the protocol to hold those accountable when accidents do happen? Meaning that accidents happen, civilians die. How do you hold your individuals accountable in the military, IDF, government personnel? But before that, I want to speak about another incident that occurred. So in the feed zones, where obviously Israel is feeding Gazans during the wartime, there's accusations that IDF soldiers are shooting and killing indiscriminately people at the feed zones. The UN, I think, reported that there was 1,300 people that have been killed by IDF soldiers. It was reported that there was an IDF soldier that made mention, allegedly, that he had orders that to shoot any of the civilians, whether they were combatants or not, that they could have free reign to shoot these civilians, and that's why civilians have been shot. Now, obviously, I don't see the verification process in that. I don't know if they actually verified thoroughly if this IDF soldier actually said what he said. But with that being out there, what is your response to people that are saying IDF is killing people as they go to the places that they're supposed to be served food?
That's false. First of all, since the beginning of the war, I said we have to let in humanitarian aid because we have no quarrel with the civilian population, although I have to say many civilians joined the October 7th massacre and came and hacked our women, our children, horrible things that happened. But in general, you do everything you can to avoid civilian casualties. You don't want to, a 3-year-old child is not a terrorist, obviously. So I said, listen, we got to put in the humanitarian aid. And we did. And but a few months ago, something happened. Hamas was looting the food trucks at gunpoint. They were shooting the drivers. They were taking the food. They took the lion's share for themselves, and the remainder they sold at exorbitant prices to the Gazan population. So they were actually stealing food from their own people. And so we thought, hey, we got to stop this. So we stopped the food trucks and then made our own distribution points that would go around the Hamas terrorists and give the food directly to the people. What happened was that Hamas interdicted that too. And they started firing at our people, and our people fired in response. And that's how civilians got killed. They fired at our people in the distribution points, which were, by the way, manned by Americans. And they were in danger of loss of life because of these Hamas attacks. So in this exchange of gunfire, civilians died. But if Hamas hadn't done this, nobody would have died. We were there to give food. Since that, went awry, I decided, all right, we'll continue trying to distribute food through these separate American-run locations. But I'm going to let the food trucks in anyway, and I know Hamas is going to steal the bulk of it, but I want food to reach the population. So here's what happened. Food prices plummeted. They just plummeted because now there's, it's a market force. If you have a lot, even though quite a bit of it is stolen, the prices go down, people have food, and in order to continue the lie, they brought in, I don't know if you saw these pictures, Brandon, of these 3 children, one in the cover of the New York Times, looks like a starved baby. It tears your heart out. The mother is holding. The mother is not emaciated, but the child is. Turns out he has cerebral palsy. That is, it's congenital. The other 2 children, which I think 2 of them we took out to be treated, also have congenital diseases that make them emaciated. And there's a very simple thing. I mean, a lot of this is staged. There was deprivation, but there was no starvation policy. And the only ones who are deliberately starved are our hostages. Did you see this picture of one of our hostages, totally emaciated? And you see the arm of his Hamas captor, the guard who's keeping him, torturing him, corpulent, thick. I think Ambassador Huckabee, America's ambassador to Israel, he said that the only diet that these Hamas should go on is an Ozempic diet because they're so fat, So that's really, again, this reversal of truth that goes on. Yes, there was deprivation of food because of Hamas interdiction of the food trucks. Yes, there were incidents because of Hamas firing at the distribution points that we set up. And I have to tell you, Israel has the most moral army and also the most adjudicated army because we don't allow, any of these incidents to go uninvestigated. We investigate them. There's an independent investigation. That's in the army. There's an independent investigation above the army, if it's necessary, in our judiciary, which that corrupt prosecutor, before he had to escape, the sexual assault charges, he said Israel has not only the means inside the army to check, malfeasance, but above the army. And I stand with our soldiers. I mean, they're the most moral soldiers in the world, none more moral, I could say. And just as America investigates its own forces when necessary, so does Israel.
And Prime Minister, I find it interesting that the public or people in the media don't get this, what you're saying. It's clear as the noonday sun to me, some of the things that you've alluded to. There's an accusation of a genocide that's occurring. And I'm not sure if people don't understand what a genocide is, but people are saying that Israel is committing a genocide against Gazans, against Palestinians in the West Bank, although their population numbers have grown. Although I've never seen a genocide performed where you feed the people who you're trying to genocide and give them leaflets and notification to exit. And I've never seen these things. So I'm shocked that the media continues to cover it this way. How do you and the PR of Israel improve to this point where the information that's true can be disseminated properly? Because I just don't understand how the Palestinians and the, not just Palestinians, but the Hamas, some of the news outlets are just pitching lies every day. The emaciated children with no rebuttal. They're lying about a genocide. They're showing all these videos. This is why I wanted to do this interview and get it out there, because I have not seen a legitimate video of some of the starvation claims. Not one of the bombs and any of those things. So how does Israel help themselves or help you guys with PR to get the truth out instead of a bunch of lies?
Well, listen, we've been fighting a 7-front war against Iran, a murderous regime that calls for our destruction, with all these proxies who call for our destruction, who massacred our men, beheaded our people, raped our women, and then murdered them. Horrible. Burnt babies alive and took hundreds of hostages, innocent people, grandmothers, grandchildren, Holocaust survivors. And, one of the things that I've been very active in is to get our hostages out. We got 207 out of 255. We intend to get them all out. But yeah, they lie all the time. So how do you combat the tsunami of lies? That's the 8th front. There's a 7-front war against Iran, Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and so on, and we're winning that war. But the war of information, you're quite right to point out, that's a tougher battle. It's a tougher battle because there are now these, the propensity to accept the Hamas lies, its statistics, its fake pictures, its the whole fake scenarios. That's maybe built into most of the Western press, not all of it, but most of it. But there's another thing. There's the abuse of the social media. You know, you've got TikTok, you've got other social media that have algorithms in there, and you have paid bots that push responses that make people feel, oh, well, everybody's against Israel. And so you put in this massive effort, by the way, much advanced by countries that are not friendly to Israel. It's Qatar, China, and others. They have these social influence campaigns that besmirch Israel. I'm sorry to say, it's the truth. And they appeal to the American public in particular. And you'd have someone saying, listen, I'm responding to one of these assertions, okay? And he's saying, I'm a resident of Texas. I'm a longtime supporter of Israel. But what I see now, I can't take this, all the horrible stuff that they're doing. And this comes in bushels, you know? And it turns out this Texan is some guy in a basement in Pakistan, you know? And that's a campaign that brainwashes people. And I think that's a reality that we face. You ask me what's the fastest way to end this propaganda? It's to end the war as quickly as possible. And that's what I'm trying to do. We've dismantled most of the terror axis. We still have, 2 strongholds of Hamas in Gaza. I think the future of Gaza, the future of the Gazans who are now fighting Hamas, because they see that we've changed the situation there. There are Gazans who are fighting Hamas, and they say, don't listen to the media, finish the war. We want to have a free Gaza, a Gaza free from Hamas, free from their tyranny, free from the horrible terror that they impose not only on us, on the civilian Israelis, but also on us, Gazans, who disagree with Hamas. So that's happening more and more. And yes, I think we have to win this. First of all, win the war on the ground. Then you have a shot at winning the information war. But it's a long struggle. I don't want to in any way minimize it. But eventually, truth has a tougher job than lies. Lies circle the earth 100 times before a glimmer of truth can emerge. But ultimately, it does. And I believe in this. We have truth on our side, and our compass is courage. And we have both. And we'll fight, and we'll win on that front too.
And Prime Minister, and this is just my personal opinion, I think there's a deeper connection with America and Israel. It's deeper than just an ally. It's deeper than just federal funding, taxpayer dollar that we spend and send to Israel, although we get probably 75% of that back with the agreement that we have. It's bigger than that. I think it's spiritual. I literally know for a fact I'm going to get killed on social media for doing this interview.
You're going to be killed by bots from Pakistan.
Right.
That's what exactly. That's what we're going to see.
Because the interesting thing is that it's funny that I get a lot of negative comments, but I get a lot of followers at the same time. So it seems that the negative comments don't reflect how people are actually receiving the information, which lines up to the bot scenario. But I think it's deeper. Prime Minister, I think that there's a godly connection between the two countries. And I'm a big advocate for Israel to exist and for us Americans to do whatever we can to allow Israel to be safe. What is your thoughts on this? Because you're coming from a position as the Prime Minister. Do you think it's a spiritual connection, or it's just business at the end of the day?
No. I've spoken not only to so many Americans over the years who say that they actually say, in a peculiar way, they say what the radical terrorist Islamists are saying. What the radical terrorist Islamists are saying, we hate death to America, death to Israel. They start with America, then they go to Israel. And they say, and why do they say death to Israel? Because we stand in their way to conquer the Middle East, subjugate all the Muslims who don't agree with them, kill all the Christians and Jews, and then proceed to Europe and from there to America. They have these insane ideas, these insane ideology. And Israel stands in their way. And what they say, that Israel is the small Satan and America is the big Satan. And we just are closer to them. So they want to kill us, but eventually they want to kill you. Why? Because we stand for a different idea. We stand for the idea of liberty. We stand for the idea of the sacredness of individual life and the rights of individual. And I've shared that so often with President Trump. He's been just remarkable in supporting Israel through thick and thin. He joined us in the in this precision attack on Iran's nuclear facility, which ultimately is aimed at America. And he's just been terrific. But I find this echoing among many, many Americans who've not been diverted with the false propaganda against Israel. Remember that, I spoke in the American Congress 4 times. It's a great honor. And when I stand at that podium in a joint session of Congress and I look at the wall and they quote Moses, they quote Moses, who brought liberty, took us out from bondage in Egypt, but brought the idea of freedom to all humanity. And America was built as the city on the hill. That's the city on the hill. The original city on the hill is Jerusalem, where I'm talking to you from. And America was built on these ideas, these biblical ideals that we share. And this is anathema to our radical Islamist enemies. So a lot of Americans agree when the Islamists say they're just like America. We are you and you are us. And in many ways, in the most fundamental ways of civilization against barbarism, they're absolutely right on that. And many Americans feel that. But the battle that we're fighting right now is not merely our battle, it's your battle. And, we don't ask for American boots on the ground. We don't ask for America, this whole idea that we're going to draw America into a third world war. That's what they said before our successful campaign against Iran. That's hokum. It's nonsense. In fact, the opposite is true. We're creating a possibility of peace, the possibility of expanding the circle of peace that President Trump and I brought with the Abraham Accords with 4 Arab states who made peace simultaneously with Israel. And if we win this war against the terrorists, which we will, then the avenue for peace will increase. The stronger Israel gets, the more we can make peace with our neighbors. And the stronger we are depends a lot on the cooperation and friendship and alliance that we have with the greatest democracy of them all, the United States. So I agree with you. Many, many Americans understand that. Some have been diverted by this rash propaganda, but we'll win the war. We'll also win the peace, and we'll win their hearts again.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, I want to give you again one more question. And if you had an opportunity, right? Which this is a presented opportunity to speak to the world. I wish that everybody in the world was actually watching this. I know we'll have a lot of people watching it, but if you could speak to everybody in the world to give them one centralized message of, your thoughts, your direction for Israel, your direction for this war, what would that statement be to the world?
Well, start with this war. This war could be over tomorrow. You need 5 things. The first is for Hamas to lay down its arms and release. The second is to release all the remaining hostages. The third is to demilitarize Gaza. That's different from laying down their arms, because demilitarization means you can't smuggle arms into Gaza and you can't manufacture weapons in Gaza itself. The fourth thing is to have Israel overriding security control over Gaza to prevent the resurgence of terrorism. And the fifth is to create a transitional authority in Gaza that is run by people, Palestinians and others, who are not teaching their children that they have to annihilate Israel, kill every Jew, and practice terrorism. These are the 5 things that I think can create a different future for Gaza, a different future for Israel, a different future for the Middle East. This is part of this wider battle that I talked about, the battle between civilization and barbarism, between freedom and tyranny. And I think many in the leaders in the West actually understand this. They actually tell me that, Brandon, they call me up and they say, we know that you're doing the right thing. I think the Chancellor of Germany said it publicly. He said, you're doing the work that we should do to protect ourselves, like preventing Iran from developing ballistic missiles that could reach Germany or could reach Washington or could reach New York, or whatever. We're doing that, but they're under the pressure of the false media reports. They're under pressure by Islamist minorities that are very violent and very vocal in their own countries. And I say, look, that's not going to, that's not going to change us. I think it's very important that people like you have the guts, the courage, the integrity to get the truth out. And I think it's very important that we win, not only for us, but for you and for the future of the world. Because if the terrorists win, if the Iran axis rebuilds itself and they build the weapons of mass death and the means to reach every city in the United States, every city in the West, then we have a very somber future in front of us. But it won't happen because we're here fighting for all of us, and we'll win.
Well, I want to say God bless you, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thank you so much for coming on. I just have so much respect for you, especially doing this interview in light of the other things that are going on. You know, you guys are literally in the middle of a war, and you are willing to come on and speak to the people in America and people that follow me. So I just want to say thank you so much. God bless you. We're praying for you. We're praying for Israel, and you just be safe out there.
Thank you. And I see these two flags behind us, so I could say, God bless Israel, God bless America, and God bless our great alliance. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.